parent's worst nightmare is waking up to their child screaming in pain in the middle of the night with an ear infection. Hello, this is Dr. Kevin Cantwell, and I'm joined by Jody Smith, the practical medical nutritionist. Our goal with these talks is to give you actionable steps in order to help you to get and ultimately stay healthy in a practical, sustainable way. Jody, let's talk about ear infections in children. What can a parent do about a middle ear infection?
Boy, you've been there and I've been there. With lots of children, that is a parent's nightmare. Let's talk about what we do when we have an ear infection in the middle of the night. One thing that you almost always have on hand is an onion. And believe it or not, if you boil an onion until it is transparent, that only takes about 5 to 10 minutes, take the onion out of that boiling water, let it cool enough so that you're not going to burn your child's ear, and hold that over your child's ear. That is a miraculous help for an ear infection in the middle of the night. That will actually help to draw some of the fluid out. It will help to comfort them. Many a night I have used that onion trick in the middle of the night. But what we really want to do is get to the root of why would a child have an ear infection? Why is this such an ongoing problem? Well, remember, those little ear tubes are short. And so until they grow out and they can clear fluid, if fluid gets in there, it becomes a great breeding ground for all kinds of bacteria. And that can be from nursing a baby, it can be from a bottle, it can be from juice. There's lots of different reasons. But one of the reasons that will happen is a dairy intolerance. And even the American Academy of Pediatrics says that dairy is the most common cause of ear infection. And so if you see your child has had more than 2, then you need to look at possibly a dairy intolerance as being the reason. So what we want to encourage parents to do, if they have ear infections as a history with their child, is to take that child off of dairy 100% for 21 days. It's the only food that takes that long to get it out of the system. So you need to mark on the calendar. 21 days later, we can do an experiment, and I think you'll find it really shows you whether or not they are dairy intolerant. Now remember, this isn't an allergy like it's going to give them hives or anaphylaxis. This is an intolerance rather than a histaminic reaction, but it can sure save you a lot of hassle with ear infections.
Now, can ear infections be prevented?
They really can. One of the things that I look for, especially if you know you have a child that's prone to ear infections, you know how they cough a little, or you just know they've had a really rough week. Start with a drop. An ear drop that I use called mullein and garlic. It comes under many different brand names. There's lots available. But if you put a couple of those drops in a child's ear, let's just say you just notice they're starting to get a little bit of a cold, that will stop that environment from being able to host bacteria, and so you don't develop an ear infection, and it works. You can even use it after a child has an ear infection, but those mullein and garlic drops are excellent. Also, if you have a child that has really bad ear wax, and that often contributes also to an ear infection, you can candle their ears, and there's lots of information about how to do that. But buy these little ear candles, and they're very simple to do, moms, and they will pull that wax out. And a lot of times, I have one son who gets terrible pain and pressure in his ear, even now as a teenager. And if I will use those ear candles, it'll relieve that pressure. If he thinks he's getting an ear infection, he's like, "Mom, do the candles." And once we pull that wax out and get all that crud out of there, he's like, "Oh, wow, it's so much better." So yes, we can prevent them, we can stop them, we can get dairy out so they don't get them, and we can do a lot to help them once they have them.
So if my child is allergic to dairy, do they need to be off it completely or just be careful with the dairy?
They need to be off of it completely, and that means you're going to be looking for things that have dairy in them. Bread has dairy in it. Might say caseinate or lactose, or something casein, which is milk protein. You can be allergic to both the lactose and the casein, or intolerant to both of those. And so we want it out 100%. So check your labels carefully. It's not about how much, it's about how frequently you have it.
So is dairy the only thing that contributes to the ear infections?
No, it could be any food. The most common that we see is dairy. Second most common is gluten, or the protein component found in several grains. Next comes eggs or soy or corn. Now those are the top 5, but there are other things too, but those are the ones we would most commonly look at.
Will my child outgrow the ear infections?
Yes, they really will outgrow the ear infections as that little tube grows. The problem is if you don't get to the root of what's happening, then what will happen is as soon as it passes and the ear tubes grow out, it'll go into tonsils and adenoids, then down into the lungs, become asthma, and if we don't fix the problem, we still have the problem.
So what about ear tubes? Now, myrigotomy tube seems to be a quick solution to chronic ear infections.
Yes, it does. And what that does is that punctures the eardrum. And anybody that's ever had their eardrum rupture knows that's how all the fluid comes out. Then all of a sudden you can hear again. It's important for children to hear. And I'm not saying there isn't a time to use ear tubes because there is a time. But remember, whether you puncture that eardrum and drain the fluid, you still have to fix the problem. And if the fluid is building up because of a dairy intolerance or another allergen, you've got to fix that problem or the ear tube, you're going to have set after set after set of ear tubes. I've seen children with as many as 10 sets of ear tubes. And the key is we don't want any surgical procedures unless that is the last option.
Now, what about removing the tonsils and adenoids? Is that a reasonable solution to the ear infection as well?
Well, of course, that's incredibly invasive. Now, I'm not saying there's never a time that needs to happen. I've had situations in my own family where the tonsils have been so infected that we had to get that load of infection off the body so that then we could build the immune system and we could work within the constraints we had, get the allergens out. That is a last resort, not a first resort. I can say that hundreds of children have avoided having ear tubes and having tonsillectomies and adenoidectomies by getting to the root of that dairy intolerance and getting dairy out of their diet and building up their immune system, restoring their good gut flora because that's so destroyed by all those antibiotics. So they're trying to do less and less surgery. It's invasive. There's all kinds of things that can happen as a result of surgery, lots and lots of side effects. So what we want to do is we want to say, are there some simple things like the mullein and garlic drops? Are there simple things like using an onion to try to help in the middle of the night? Can we, if we do have to take an antibiotic, replace that good bacteria? And can we get to the root, which is get those allergens out and then stop the problem from going any further?